Video games are one of the most advanced technological creations in which we lose ourselves in an amazing fantasy world, all inside a console in our very own home. And in 2023, all us young people know now is HD or 4K graphics. But did video games always look this good? Have you ever played your PlayStation 5, Xbox or Nintendo Switch and wondered, how did video games evolve to as good as they are today? And when or how did it all start? Video games have been around for the past 50 years, starting with the first known console, the Magnavox Odyssey, a computer system that came out in 1972, and after that 5 years later came the Atari 2600, creating arcade games like Pong and Pac-Man. Then in the early 1980s came best-selling consoles like the ZX Spectrum and the Nintendo Entertainment System, producing classic games in 8-bit coloured graphics. But that was just the beginning. So let's take a look at how video games have started and how they have evolved over time. What was the first ever console you ever played on, and how did the technology impact you at the time?
The first console I remember having at home was the Sinclair ZX81, and I guess it impacted us because we've never ever had a computer at home before, couldn't play games, couldn't program a computer, did nothing at all. So that was the first time we could actually do something on a computer.
Back in the early 80s, before popular video game consoles became around, the only way to play the latest video games would be to fill your pockets with coins and go to the arcades. Between 1978 and 1983, this was known as the Golden Age in gaming, in which young kids and teenagers would always go to the local arcade to play the popular games such as Space Invaders, Asteroids, Centipede, Mario Bros, Donkey Kong and Pac-Man. Space Invaders was so popular that in Japan they suffered a shortage of 100 yen coins. Pac-Man became so popular by the end of the 20th century it hit a whopping $2.5 billion in revenue. By the mid-80s, arcade popularity declined, as the invention of video game consoles such as the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Genesis helped bring these arcade classics to your home TV. In 1983, the family computer, also known as the Famicom for short, was released in Japan, releasing with 3 of Nintendo's arcade classics such as Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye. The redesigned version of the console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, also known as the NES for short, was released in the rest of the world 2 years later. As well as bringing arcade games to this console in cartridge form, it also introduced new games such as Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid. This became a success as these games have continued to be a really big popular franchises in present day. What was your favourite video game when growing up?
I guess my favourite would be FIFA 95 for the Super Nintendo. I'd have been about 22 when it came out, and all my friends would have came around and we all played together. So yeah, I really enjoyed FIFA 95.
As every youth got used to the concept of video games, it was all about a change. 8-bit graphics became a thing of the past. With the release of the newest console, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, this offered 16-bit graphics, which was double the quality of previous consoles. It was made to be the successor of the NES. How did the technology of the Super Nintendo blow your mind at the time?
I guess from growing up playing games on the ZX81 and the Spectrum in the 1980s, I got from text games to games like chunky graphics to amazing arcade style graphics. So the quality of the games at home on the Super Nintendo, way beyond anything I'd ever seen. It was brilliant.
In Europe, Japan and South Korea, it had this design and had coloured buttons. However, in Japan it was called the Super Famicom, and in South Korea it was called the Super Comboy. Elsewhere in the world, it was still the Super Nintendo, played the same games, however it took a slightly different design, with purple buttons. The Super Nintendo was a success, as it sold 49.1 million units worldwide. Although it wasn't the only popular 16-bit console out at the time, in the early 90s, Nintendo had a huge competition with Sega, as they had their hit console, the Sega Genesis, also releasing classic 16-bit games like Sonic the Hedgehog, which made the console a huge success at the time, but in the end, Sega couldn't keep up with the quality of Nintendo's games. Sega tried to beat their rivals instead of fulfilling the demand of users, which resulted in the console's failure. Nintendo continued to produce good quality games such as Super Mario Kart, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Super Mario World, Super Tennis, and many more. Unlike the previous consoles, the Super Nintendo made 2D games with 3D effects. Due to the enhanced graphics and core processors, these effects were seen a lot in games like Star Fox, Donkey Kong Country, F-Zero, and many more. With the power of this technology, Nintendo was able to keep making impressive games. This technology kept advancing, that Nintendo saw the means to make a new console. So in 1996, we saw the release of the Nintendo 64 in Japan. What was your favourite Nintendo 64 game?
Pretty much sure it'll be Mario Kart 64, because I'd had it on the Super Nintendo, the SNES, but now there's more courses, better graphics, more to do in the game, better gameplay.
I'm sure the jump from 2D to 3D was a lot mind-blowing and revolutionary for you as well.
Again, it was just better graphics altogether. Instead of flat cars in Mario Kart, the carts are all 3D now, and so it's just better graphics, better gameplay altogether. Pretty good.
On release, the console launched with Pilot Wings and Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 impacted young people in many ways and created so many memories. Even in present day, young teenagers and adults like to speedrun the game, playing it again and again to get the best time and upload it to online leaderboards. Late into the console's life cycle, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was released, which helped to revolutionise how modern 3D games are made today. The Nintendo 64 helped bring friends together to socialise and bond, as they added 4 controller ports to the console, unlike 2 with the previous consoles. This allowed 4 people to sit in the same room to play games like Mario Kart 64, Super Smash Bros., Mario Party, and many more. The 3D games were popular due to the console's 64-bit graphics, which was a huge upgrade from the 16-bit graphics of the Super Nintendo. Also, the games ran on cartridges rather than discs, which helped make loading times way faster than before. In order to be a success, Nintendo had to compete with Sony, with their main console, the PlayStation, releasing in 1997, with hit games like Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid. Nintendo and Sony once worked together. They planned to create an add-on for the Super Nintendo. This would be called the SNES CD. This would add the ability to use discs with the SNES. It was nicknamed the Sony PlayStation. This project was cancelled and never released due to Nintendo's disagreement with the licensing, but it was planned to look like this. Nintendo then went ahead and partnered with Philips and made the CDI. After this, Nintendo went ahead to make the Nintendo 64 and Sony made the PlayStation. From this point until present day, they are forever big rivals. With Nintendo's 6th generation console, they wanted to make their games look better in order to compete with the newest consoles at the time, Sony's PlayStation and Microsoft's Xbox. To do this, Nintendo partnered up with a graphics hardware design company called ArtX. With their help, they could produce more visually appealing games with 128-bit architecture. Nintendo wanted to attract a young audience, so they made a console with games running on small discs rather than cartridges in order to make them look better. In order to compete with the other hit consoles, they wanted to add games with online play, which they were able to achieve with a few games such as Mario Kart Double Dash and Kirby's Air Ride. To bring young kids and teenagers together, Nintendo also created LAN games. These were mostly racing games which allowed multiple people to play together. Initially, you can only have 4 players per console on the GameCube. However, by connecting 2 consoles together using a shared Ethernet hub or using a cross cable, 2 people can play per console, with a maximum of 8 consoles linked together. This allowed for a whopping total of 16 people to be playing Mario Kart on the same game in the same room. This was mind-blowing at the time, to have this many people playing on the same game at once. Now it may be cramped, but it really brought young teens and adults together. To allow easy transport of consoles between your friends' houses, they added a handle on the back of the console so you could carry it easily. This generation was known as LAN parties. In 2006, the Wii was released as Nintendo's 5th generation home console. This time, Nintendo President Satoru Iwata stated that they wanted to avoid competing with Microsoft and Sony and make their goal to target groups of players through amazing novel games rather than competing for the best graphics and performance.
My earliest video game memory is playing Mario Super Galaxy on the Wii with my dad.
What memories do you have of playing on the Wii?
I remember I had Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. I remember I played that all the time, especially with my dad.
Do you have any memories of playing on the Wii?
I do. I remember playing. Me and my brother used to be very competitive with playing like Wii bowling and with boxing. The Wii on Wii boxing as well. I did enjoy playing that, but I always got my buttocks handed to us.
This console opted for a controller using motion controls as well as standard button controls. This was to create more fun and interactive games that really appealed to a young audience. One game that really showed the capabilities of this was Wii Sports, as it was bundled with every console. For example, if you swung the controller underarm in bowling, the character would throw the ball in the game. If you swung your remote in tennis, you would swing your racket in the game. Going from traditional games to innovative motion control games was a bold move. However, it was a success as the console sold 26 million units worldwide by 2009. At the time, the interactive sports games like Wii Sports and Wii Fit helped young people with their physical literacy, helping to improve their fitness and coordination skills, helping them to develop real-life skills while they were playing video games. Multiplayer games were a big marketing push with the Wii, as they wanted to bring young people together to play games with friends.
My earliest video game memory is when I was playing Halo 3 with my brother and my dad.
How do video games affect you, and like the technology in video games affect you?
They affect us quite well. It's like I see myself as more creative now that like some of the videos games I've played, like there's outcomes and endings and like different storylines. It's made things interesting to make us like think more like outside the box.
Back in the day, you would buy a game, and that was it. It was your game, and the only thing you'd find out about it is what you discovered from your friends. Or you could buy a gallery book. Now you can just search it online. If you want to play games with your friends, you can simply play from your own home and plug in a headset and talk to each other from your own houses.
My favourite game, it was like a mix between Halo 3 and Skyrim because like I mainly enjoy playing them due to like memories with my brother, and Skyrim had like a new sort of atmosphere nothing like else had, and it was also on my birthday.
What was your favourite game growing up and why?
I think it was Minecraft just because of all the endless possibilities you could get in the game.
How do video games affect you?
They affected us positively because I always played them in my spare time.
And now you can easily go on social media to start conversations and using hashtags to talk to communities, which is way more advanced to what it was. So not only has the video game technology advanced, but the phones and computers have as well, making us less social, but on the positive side, it benefits us to what it was. In present day, we sit in our modern day consoles and say amazing HD or 4K graphics and take it for granted. But it's good to see how it evolved and to see what video game technology once was.